Thank you for tuning in to Keanoreads Goosebumps. Today I'll be reading the fourth instalment from the Tales to Give You Goosebumps collection, Special Edition 1, Strangers in the Wood. "This ruins everything, Lucy," wailed Jessica when I called her to deliver the bad news. "I can't believe you're getting shipped off to... what's the name of that town anyway?" "Fairview," I said with a long, very sad sigh. I twisted the phone cord around and around my finger. I could just cry. I'm not usually so depressed. Actually, Jessica says I'm annoyingly happy most of the time, but finding out that I'll be spending 6 weeks this summer with Great Aunt Abigail in her boring farm town was enough to put me in a bad mood forever. I mean, there's nothing in Fairview but tractors and cows and cornfields. I hoped that something exciting had happened to Fairview since my last visit to Great Aunt Abigail's 2 summers before. But when Dad pulled the car into town, the place looked even duller and drabber than I remembered. One grocery, a hardware store, a gas station and a tiny library. We bumped our way down Great Aunt Abigail's long dirt road and pulled up in front of 25 Butterfly Lane, her small red brick house. I climbed out of the car and looked around. Fields and forests as far as I could see. Great Aunt Abigail came running out, dressed in her usual flower dress and trainers. She looked a little different from how I remembered. A little older, a little more wrinkled, a little skinnier. We all greeted one another, then Mum and Dad followed Great Aunt Abigail into the house to have tea. I started to let my dog Muttster out of the car so that he could explore the garden, but the big brown mutt pulled back, his tail tucked firmly in between his legs. "Muttster, what's your problem?" I asked. He acted like a big scaredy cat, whimpering and huddling in the back seat. When I finally coaxed him out of a doggy biscuit, he started barking really loud and running around and around in circles. The thing you have to know about Muttster is that he never barks. He's really well behaved. That's why he was being allowed to stay in Fairview with me while Mum and Dad went off on their big trip to Asia. I should have known that something was terribly wrong as soon as Muttster started barking, but I didn't guess. I just thought the big dog was excited. Then, when Great Aunt Abigail came outside to see what all the fuss was about, Muttster went really crazy, growling and snapping like a mean old junkyard hound. "Oh dear, Lucy," she said nervously. "Why is he doing that? Maybe you should put him in the garden." I didn't want to tie him up, but Muttster was just going ballistic, so I tied him to a huge oak tree and ran back to the porch to say goodbye to my parents. "Honey, I'll miss you," Mum said. "You won't be able to call us because we're moving around so much, but we'll phone when we can and send lots of postcards." After a lot of hugs and kisses, my parents were off on their trip. I waved sadly until their car disappeared down the long driveway. What a boring summer this was going to be, I thought glumly. I had no idea how wrong I was. Great Aunt Abigail did her best to cheer me up. "I have a surprise for you, dear," she said. "Your favourite biscuits." Biscuits? I'd almost forgotten that Great Aunt Abigail made the best peanut butter fudgies in the world. I took a biscuit off the tray that she offered. Still warm and soft from the oven, I bit into it eagerly. It was chewy and fudgy and peanut buttery, but something was wrong. Something didn't quite taste right. Was it too salty? Were the ingredients different? How weird, I thought. Great Aunt Abigail's biscuits are always perfect. I could see her watching me eagerly, so I finished the biscuit and pretended to love it. Then I jammed a few biscuits in my pocket and threw on my denim jacket. "I'm taking Muttster for a walk," I called out, "just to relax him." "Have fun, dear," she said, "but stay out of the woods, okay?" That's weird, I thought. She never warned me away from the woods during my other visits. Muttster and I had a nice walk in the sloping green fields. At times, the dog seemed as calm and as playful as always, but then he would start barking excitedly again, for no reason at all. I couldn't get to sleep that night. Maybe it was because Muttster had to spend the night outside as punishment for his constant barking. At home, he always sleeps at the foot of my bed. I tried reading a book, but that only made me feel more awake, so I gazed out of the window and counted the stars. And that's when I saw the frightening lights in the purple night sky, 6 lights forming a circle. At first, I thought they were super bright stars because they were up in the sky, but then I realized they were moving, lowering slowly to the ground. As I stared with my mouth hanging open in amazement, the lights hovered over the woods on the other side of Great Aunt Abigail's cornfield. I felt their light washing over me, brightening my whole room, bright as daylight. Then Slowly, the circle of lights lowered into the woods, and it became dark again. A cold shudder shook my body. What had I just seen? I crept down the hall to Great Aunt Abigail's room and called softly outside her closed door. But she has always been a sound sleeper. She didn't wake up. Back in my room, I could hear Mutster down in the garden barking furiously. I shut the window tight. How would I ever get to sleep? "Do you know what those lights are out in the woods?" I asked Great Aunt Abigail as I sat down to breakfast. She narrowed her eyes at me. I thought I saw her cheeks go pink. "Lights? What lights, dear?" "How do you want your eggs?" "Scrambled, please." There were about 6 lights, all in a circle. They were so weird. "Don't worry, dear. I'm sure it's just reflections or something. Have you fed Mutster?" Why is she so eager to change the subject, I wondered. Why does she seem so nervous? Her scrambled eggs tasted different too. Not as fluffy and fresh tasting as in the past. After I ate, I took Mutster his breakfast, a bowl of dry dog food. Then I sat on the lawn, talking to the dog, and staring at the woods, hoping to see something, anything that might explain those lights. Thinking about those lights made me feel strange. You know how your stomach feels after you've eaten 5 slices of pizza? That was it, only more nervous and fluttery. My stomach felt even funnier after Great Aunt Abigail and I took a drive to the hardware store. Did I say drive? It was more like a roller coaster ride. To my shock, my usually careful Great Aunt drove like a maniac. We almost clipped the letterbox on the way out of the driveway. Then she kept weaving from lane to lane and whizzing right through the stop signs. I held onto the dashboard, too terrified to scream. I got my voice back when we finally pulled over on Main Street. "Aunt Abigail!" I cried breathlessly. "Is there something wrong with the car? Why are you driving like this?" "Like what?" she replied innocently. The only thing more frightening than the drive to town was the drive back to the house. By the time we returned, we'd gone through 2 red lights, terrorised a farmer on his tractor, and missed a parked car by an inch. Great Aunt Abigail didn't seem to notice that anything was wrong. My heart still in my mouth, I leaped out of the car and staggered over to Mutster. He wagged his bushy brown tail and licked my face, as if I'd been gone for 10 years. But he stopped mid-lick. When Great Aunt Abigail climbed out of the car, "Grrr," he growled ferociously, straining at his leash. What is going on here? I asked myself. Why does everything seem so different, so wrong? I saw the eerie lights again that night, and the next night too, bigger and brighter than ever, hovering in a circle over the woods. As I pressed my face up against the window to watch them, I suddenly had a frightening thought. They looked just like the lights of the alien spaceship in my favourite film, Attack of the Pod People. I tried desperately to come up with another explanation for the lights. Street lights? Not in Fairview. A plane? A plane couldn't hover like that, and I've never seen a plane with lights that bright. I felt a chill down my back as I realised there was no other explanation. Aliens had invaded Fairview, and they were landing in the woods near my great aunt's house. Wrapping my arms round myself to stop the chills, I found myself thinking about Great Aunt Abigail. She seemed so different, so changed. Had the aliens taken over Great Aunt Abigail's mind, just like in the Pod People film? I could hear Mutster start to bark down in the garden. Dogs have a 6th sense, I knew. Mutster sensed that Great Aunt Abigail was possessed by an alien. That's why he had been barking and growling at her. Suddenly, gripped with fear, I turned away from the window. Was I next? Would the aliens come after me next? I had to get out of there, run away, but where? Mum and Dad were thousands of miles away. Should I call my best friend Jessica back home? She'd think I was joking. Besides, how could she help? I needed someone closer. The police? Trying not to make a sound, I crept down the stairs to the phone in the kitchen. Great Aunt Abigail, or whoever she was, had got there first. She had her back to me. She couldn't see me, but I could hear her. Don't worry, my niece doesn't know. Yes, I told her to stay away from the woods, and she won't know anything until it's all over tomorrow night. My palms started sweating, and I got that itchy feeling under my arms I always get when I'm really nervous. All over? Until what was all over? The alien invasion? Until Mutster and I had been taken off to some weird planet and they'd put us in cages? I had to get back to my room, and fast. I turned back to the stairs, but the floorboards creaked loudly beneath me. Great Aunt Abigail whirled around to face me. I gasped. My mouth dropped open in horror. My Great Aunt Abigail's face was glowing green. "Lucy, what are you doing up?" Great Aunt Abigail demanded. She took a few steps forward to me, and suddenly I realised I was terrified of her. Just going back to bed," I stammered, backing away. I hurried up the stairs, my entire body trembling. I closed the bedroom door tightly and waited to hear Great Aunt Abigail pad up the stairs and go into her room. I knew I couldn't spend another minute in the house. I couldn't stay there with an alien from outer space. Frantically, I pulled on jeans and a sweatshirt. I had to get the police. I had to tell them about the aliens. But would they believe me? They will if they go into the woods and see the aliens first, I decided. I know, I wasn't thinking clearly, but I was having a major panic attack, and it seemed like the best idea at the time. I sneaked silently down the stairs and through the back door. I should have woken up Mutster and brought him with me to the woods, but I was sort of out of my mind with fear, so I didn't even think of him. I ran across the back garden, heading to the woods. Nothing but darkness ahead, no lights hovering in the sky. What was waiting for me in the darkness? Were there really aliens there? I needed to get a glimpse of them, just a glimpse, so I could describe them to the town police. The woods were dark, steamy and wet. It was like plunging through a thick jungle. There was no path, so I had to push my way through, stumbling over fallen logs and marshy ground. As I made my way, I kept hearing rustling noises on both sides of me. Was I being followed? Was I being watched? As I stopped to catch my breath, a light appeared up ahead. Swallowing hard, I moved towards it. The trees thinned out and I found myself in a large clearing. What were those sounds? Voices? Human voices? Or alien voices? I gasped as the bright light washed over me. The white beam blinded me, captured me in a harsh spotlight. I shielded my eyes as the light hovered over me, closing in, covering me, holding me helpless. "Bring her here," I heard a deep voice order. I felt hands tugging me. I tried to pull away, but my captor was too strong. "You can't take over my brain," I shrieked. "I won't let you." "Cut the lights," another voice ordered. The harsh lights dimmed to black. I could see smaller lights all around. As my eyes adjusted to the darkness, I saw a man walking towards me. He wore a baseball cap and long-sleeved polo shirt over jeans. "Young lady, I don't know what you're screaming about," he said, "but you can't just wander onto a film set. You just ruined a shot that took 3 hours to set up." "Film set?" I opened my mouth to reply, but no sound came out. "We asked the people in town to stay out of the woods," the man said sternly. "We're finishing our film tomorrow. Then we'll be out of here." Film? I took a deep breath, trying to get myself together. Suddenly, I heard dogs barking. "The dogs are ready," a young woman carrying a clipboard announced. She raised a dog whistle to her lips. She blew into it and made no sound that I could hear. But the dogs immediately barked louder. That explains why Mutster has been barking all the time, I told myself. He keeps hearing the dog whistle from the woods. Everything made sense now. Great Aunt Abigail warned me to stay away from the woods, the bright lights. My Great Aunt Abigail saying on the phone that it would all be over tomorrow night. I'm sorry, I told the man. Really, I'm so sorry. I felt like a total jerk. I ran all the way home. Great Aunt Abigail was waiting for me at the back door, her face tight with worry. "Lucy, where did you go? Where have you been? I was about to call the police." I told her how sorry I was, and then the words just burst out of me. "I saw the lights, and Mutster was acting so strange, and your skin was green, and you drove so wildly, and the biscuits were wrong, and... Great Aunt Abigail wrapped me in a hug and held me till I stopped trembling. When I finally backed away, she was chuckling. "I guess my green mint facial mask would give anyone the creeps," she declared. I laughed. "I should have told you about the film people," Great Aunt Abigail said, shaking her head. "But I thought they'd be gone by tomorrow. I started to say something, but she raised her hand to stop me. "I have more to explain," she said, frowning. "I have a confession to make, Lucy. I lost my glasses just before you arrived, and I've been trying to get along without them." "That's why you were driving so wild," I cried. She nodded. "That's why my cooking may have been a little off. It's so hard to see the ingredients." We hugged each other again and shared a good laugh. "I can't believe you thought I was an alien from outer space," Great Aunt Abigail said. "You've seen too many films." She was right. I felt like such a fool. We had some hot chocolate. It didn't taste quite right, but I didn't complain. And then I made my way upstairs to go to sleep. The night had grown cool, and I loved sleeping with the windows open, so I went to the airing cupboard to get an extra blanket. As I pulled open the door, Great Aunt Abigail's glasses tumbled out. Terrific, I thought. Now she won't have to buy new ones. I picked them up and carried them down the hall to her room. Aunt Abigail, I called. The door was open a crack. I pushed it open and stepped inside. She stood with her back to me. Aunt Abigail, look, I found your... My words choked in my throat as she turned to face me, and I saw the 4 slimy tentacles waving at her sides. Her skin glowed bright green in the light from the chest of drawers, and her 3 fat, black lips made sucking sounds as she unrolled a long, blue tongue. You found my glasses, she croaked, reaching out all 4 tentacles towards me. Thank you, Lucy. And so concludes Strangers in the Woods. I hope you've enjoyed this audiobook. If you have, feel free to leave a like, comment, or perhaps even subscribe. I'm currently working on Deep Trouble. It's just taking a little bit longer to produce than expected. For updates on future releases and other related Goosebump pictures, feel free to check out @Keanoreads on Instagram.